I was going to be competing with bocce and booze next time. It's tough with a Prohibition era history to get too fun into that. But thanks to all of you for coming out on this summer evening. I know you guys had a lot of things to do. Well, it's really hot outside. Maybe the AC is helping the attendance today. So I want to talk about the Attleboro World Series. So kind of a brief background, I guess, is that I grew up in Attleboro, and I remember that during the Attleboro Tricentennial celebration that the Sun Chronicle had written some kind of short piece about, flash, moments in Attleboro history that Babe Ruth had played baseball in Attleboro. And that kind of stuck with me. I was, interested in sports. I was never good at sports. I wasn't as good as AJ at sports for, Attleboro sports celebrity. But I always loved the history of it, and it's something that always kind of stayed with me, where, you have to take some little bit of pride in where you grew up. And as much as Attleboro being the former jewelry capital of the world is kind of cool, it didn't really compete with, Babe Ruth having played in my hometown. So eventually I got older, my skills as a researcher improved a little bit, and I decided to go out on the internet and just kind of Google Babe Ruth, Attleboro, see what I can come up with. And there was a decent amount written about it, kind of short articles. There was a baseball guru article. There was some other stuff that kind of came up. So I read through some of these. They weren't very long. They weren't very detailed. And what I kind of quickly came up with is that none of them agreed with each other. One of them would say that Babe Ruth played for Attleboro in 1920. Another would say he played for North Attleboro in 1919. They said that there were 6 games. The North Attleboro Historic Society was like, oh, we played these games, and North Attleboro won almost all of them. So I was like, well, not all of these can be true. And what it kind of came out with is that none of them were really 100% true. So really, I came to the library thinking that maybe they've got some archive stuff. Maybe it's going to all just be waiting for me, and I can just kind of pull out a 10 page thing and read it, and that would answer all my questions. And unfortunately, that turned out to not be true. The library had a lot of great resources, but it was going to take a little more work for me to put this together. So I, really dove in for the first time into microfilm, which is kind of a new thing. Kids, my generation, we go to the internet, we go to books. We don't really pull out the, October of 1919 microfilm of the Attleboro Sun and start digging in to find this. But I think it's a story that's worth, for me, it was worth knowing, and I think worth sharing, and I hope that all of you agree that it's worth learning about. So one thing that kind of stood out to me, so we went on a family vacation for my parents' 30th wedding anniversaries to Alaska and Vancouver. So we got back on the last day of the cruise, and we didn't really have that much planned to do that day before we flew back home. So I'm a huge minor league baseball fan, probably even more than Major League Baseball. And I knew that there was a Vancouver Canadians minor league baseball franchise. They're the Blue Jays short season A-ball, guys just get drafted and came up their team. So my wife Christina agreed to join me to go over and see the Vancouver Canadians. So we show up to this old stadium, Nat Bailey Stadium. And it kind of looks like what McCoy Stadium looked like before it was renovated. So we kind of are walking around at first, and there's thousands of people. It was like youth T-shirt giveaway day, and A&W root beer floats for $1. So this is huge, sold out. It was actually the first time in my life. I probably shouldn't admit this. I had to buy tickets from a scalper. So again, I was like, I'm here. I'm never going to be back in Vancouver. So fine, I'll pay more than I should have paid for A-League. So we're walking around the stadium, and they had these murals up. And so Rogers Hornsby, Christy Matheson, Babe Ruth, Smokey Joe Wood, all of these murals of these players. And I said, what do a lot of these have in common? A lot of these guys played in the Attleboro Little World Series. So here I am on the other side of the continent in Canada, and I'm looking around and I'm seeing all of these people that who does this team choose to memorialize? It's these players from this golden era of baseball, and many of them played here in Attleboro, which just kind of confirmed to me a little bit further that we have a real special history here. That this wasn't just something that happened, that might be of peculiar regional interest, but this is really a part of baseball history that should be shared. This happened over a decade before the first Major League All-Star game. This is at a time before interleague play. For some of these games that happened, it was the first and only time that an American League player and a National League player played on the same roster. So in 1920, you had George Sisler, who played for the St. Louis Browns and was the American League batting champion, played on the same team and on the same diamond as Rogers Hornsby, the great St. Louis Cardinals player, who was the National League batting champion that year. So for some of you who have been to my presentations before or have seen them online, I tried to switch up today's presentation, but I want to kind of put everyone on equal footing to kind of understand what I'm describing as the Attleboro Little World Series and kind of some basic history before I kind of go into some more specifics. So what I would consider to be the historical Little World Series were the 13 games played between 1919 and 1923 that Attleboro was at least involved with. 10 of those games were played between Attleboro and North Attleboro. There were 5 of them in 1919, 3 of them in 1920, and 2 of them in 1923. So between the Attleboro and North Attleboro series, according to my calculations, Attleboro won that series 6-4. It's kind of a brief detour. This upcoming March, I'm going to be going behind enemy lines to giving a speech at the North Attleboro Historic Preservation Society. So it's nice to get a little tune-up here, in friendly territory. They might challenge that. There's some argument that it could be 4-4, but there's no way you can count it that North Attleboro won the series. There was a disagreement in 1921 between the people who were organizing it for Attleboro and North Attleboro that led to a cancellation of the series. But Attleboro was able to find a partner in Providence and played 3 games between Attleboro and Providence in 1921 that Attleboro ultimately won 2-1. There were 20 future members of the Baseball Hall of Fame who participated in one way or the other as players in the Attleboro Little World Series. In addition to that, in 1923, Christy Matheson was the president of the Boston Braves as a Hall of Fame pitcher for the New York Giants, whose career ended after a exposure to poisonous gas when he was serving World War I. He was pretty active in providing players to Attleboro from the Boston Braves and was kind of a booster of this idea of a Little World Series. So I think that he kind of, merits a place in the history of the Little World Series, despite not playing. One thing I think is really cool, at least one player from every major league franchise that was in existence at the time participated in the Little World Series. So it really kind of shows the full spectrum of players. This wasn't just a Boston Braves, Boston Red Sox, New York Yankees, New York Giants type thing. This was really something that attracted not just everyday players, but stars from all of Major League Baseball at the time. And it took place primarily at 4 different fields. One was Brady Field, which is the picture that was in the front of this, which is kind of up near North Main Street across from where Ashton Road and Patience Street are, kind of near the Blackington Inn, a little past the Blackington Inn. I'll show some pictures kind of where it is shortly. Hayward Field, which we all know of as today. Some people might have played baseball there or gone to the pool there growing up. Is where the games were played in 1921 and 1923. Columbia Field in North Attleboro, which is also now a residential area. The field no longer exists. And in Weston Field in Providence, and I haven't really been able to figure out quite where that was in Providence, but I think also does not exist today. So here's kind of the way the games went down. In 1919, I guess I'll get into this now. So it was not at all uncommon at the time for cities to stage some type of rivalry games. Keep in mind, this is a few years before the Attleboro-North Attleboro football Thanksgiving rivalry started. So high school sports is really kind of just getting started. But there was really an appetite for sports. Radio wasn't really in existence at this time. It was still a few years away. There was certainly no television. And the idea of traveling for most people from Attleboro to go up to see Boston, economically this wasn't really too realistic. Until the 1930s, it was illegal to play baseball in Massachusetts on Sundays, and most people worked 6 days out of the week. So, and because there were no effective lighting for most games, all games were played in the afternoon and most people were at work. So if you were going to see a baseball game as kind of an average person, in Attleboro. So if you were one of the people working at Oscar Wolfenden's factory, it was probably going to be in person. It was probably going to be local. And because of that, there were a lot of semi-professional baseball players that either play in local independent minor leagues or just played kind of pickup games. And because baseball was kind of the only sport at the time, there was no real formalized football. That was still a few years away before the predecessor to the NFL was created. There were a lot of great athletes around playing baseball. So for the first 2 games of the 1919 series, and this is where I expect some pushback from North Attleboro, what we call the Little World Series, were played mostly between semi-professional baseball players. And Attleboro was really lucky. They had a very good semi-professional player who was kind of a manager, coach, a little older, named Danny O'Connell. And he got together a bunch of guys he had played with. He had a brother that played semi-professional. North Attleboro brought some people together. And Attleboro won those 2 games kind of handedly.